Welcome to another reaction video where I will be covering Paranormal Nightmare Season 20, Episode 3, Extremely Dangerous Family Haunting. This could end bad. Again, watch their full video for complete context because I will not be playing their entire video because that's downright disrespectful because they put all that time and effort into their amazing video and I'm not about stealing content like that. So, please watch their full video. Second, I will be kind of condensing the pre-channel into like the video reaction notes. That way we can save time, but also so the guys on Patreon can get the whole notes without it all being up on here. And yeah. And also, side note, this is like my 5th time trying to record this video because I forgot to put my black tourmaline on my computer like I normally do. But yeah, the spirit and entity involved don't want me talking about this because it's gonna mess up their little party. And yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to jump into this and kind of talk about like the area in which the client lives in. And by the way, I'm not going to say the client's name because I noticed there's a lot of problems in terms of other people trying to reach out to their clients to pick apart the Foreman brothers' investigation, to slander and try to discredit them, and yeah, and I'm not about that. So, guys, I get the debunkers like to help debunk, but the problem is you're also kind of messing up the healing journey of their clients. We don't want that. We want the client to heal, get solutions, and be able to succeed in life and continue on their, journey of healing and success. So yeah, from now on, every time I do a reaction video with them, I'm not going to be saying the client's name because it's a problem. And I believe in one of the videos that I covered with them, they even said it in the comments. So we're going to try to be as respectful as possible to that and not mess anything up for them. And by the way, this reaction is going to be slightly different in the way that, well, you'll find out later because Spirit had some other plans. But yeah, we're going to jump into this, and I really want to talk about the area in which they live. I believe it's called Avondale, Ohio. And the reason I want to talk about this is because what goes on in the city affects the people that live there, especially when it comes to paranormal activity. And Spirit wanted me to kind of talk more about that than the client because, again, I'll talk about that later. You'll find out why. But so there's a lot of violence, and I even picked this up during my pre-channel, but there's a lot of violence, death, sadness, pain, illegal activities that are contributing to the creation and the attraction of negative entities. So if you follow me here on my channel and or Lights at Midnight podcast, you know I talk about how thoughts are energy and we can create our own anything, really. We can create our own reality, we can create our own spirits and entities, and it can get freaky deaky. And I know I've said this quite a few times, this experience, but I have a lot of drug activity around where I live, and when people do activities like that, they can inadvertently create entities, aka thought forms, that can wreak havoc. And this city is a great example of that because a lot of the crime and just negative activities in general are creating some negative entities. And I drew an example of one because when I was doing my pre-channel, it was up in my face doing this thing with its mouth. It was like, wow, 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 whatever. You don't need the sound effects. But again, here is the picture. And this thing just lives off of the negative energy that is being produced from these activities. And that's not the only entity in that city that does that. Okay, you have to take in consideration the amount of people there and the amount of crime that's going on. So all that energy can combine into a clusterfuck, aka a nasty thought form that feeds off of it with the sole purpose of feeding off of that stuff. And so this entity here is a prime example that feeds off of that stuff and also can influence those, especially those with a weaker kind of like barrier, or if they don't have the proper judgment because they're doing drugs and things, it can open them up to influence to create even more crime because, again, it creates that energy for that thing to feed off of. And so it's just a never-ending cycle here. And that's what's going on in the city. And, guys, when you have stuff like that, it affects everybody. Not just those doing the crimes, but everybody. So if you have people that are very energy sensitive, like this client here, he's going to be one of the main like targets, and or those that are suffering with mental health or addiction and stuff. People with lower barriers, people with crevices for negative entities or spirits to get in and become attachments. And yeah, it's not cool and it sucks. And so that crime and those negative activities going on can create hauntings for that neighborhood. So I highly suspect that this guy isn't the only one experiencing paranormal activity. I bet you there's a lot of people experiencing paranormal activity. And what makes it even more difficult to even like say, hey, this is paranormal activity, because the city is so active at nighttime. And people are condensely living together, so like in apartments or just houses that are like twins or houses that are just closer together. It's hard to pinpoint whether it's the people creating the noise or things that are coming across as paranormal activity versus it being actual paranormal activity. And if you have people that have mental health issues or going through a rough time, they might question whether or not it's in their head versus not in their head versus, you know, their neighbors and people. And yeah, it can get very confusing. But that is something to take into consideration. And Spirit did want to point out that politics there have been an issue or were an issue in the past. So they were very vague about this. So for me, I'm going to say that it might have to do with like how they handle things within the city. So whether that has to do with city or town officials or policies, those things are kind of contributing to the problems that are going on in this city. So that could be maybe law enforcement, maybe they ain't doing their job, or the police is making the police system like harder for them to get criminals off the street. Like whatever it is, it's the policies and the politics that's affecting the crime and whatnot, and it's making the living worse. But it's also important to note too, like when you have all this toxicity, this is a great example of a toxic location. If you're living somewhere like this where the environment is not good when it comes to crime but also paranormal stuff, you have to take into consideration what it does energetically. So when you have all this stuff going on, it exacerbates the already existing mental and physical health conditions, creating new health issues, preventing proper healing, adding to stress and anxiety, bringing and creating paranormal activity within the neighborhood, which means multiple homes and businesses are affected, but like everyone's affected. So mind, body, and spirit, everyone's affected. It's a problem. But anyway, also, like I stated, because of the stuff that's going on, it's attracting and creating more entities, and it's attracting more earthies because it's a feeding ground for everybody. So there's multiple earthies in that town, and they go in and out of houses, and this is a great example. Now with the client, he does have an attachment, and if you watch the interview that they have with him, he seems very down to earth. He seems very like he knows his shit. And part of that is through experience, but also because he had help from a medium to help give him information. But it's clear in this interview that this client, he does have psychic abilities and energetic sensitivities. And that's partially why this specific spirit is picking on him. Now, again, there's other reasons, but he is a prime candidate for things to attack and oppress him and for paranormal activity.
I always felt like when I went in the room to go to bed, there was something in the room with me. It was like it was up on me, looking at me in the face. But I never slept with the light off. But I put my Bible in the bed. And it would always mess with the dude over by the window. I knew he was over there messing with him. And he did it to several of my roommates. He was going around in bed. I just didn't believe it was happening. It was like something crawling up on the bed with me. I would just get this awful feeling that there was somebody standing by my bed. I open up my eyes and I look up. He go up, and when he get to the ceiling, he disappear, but I could still see him. He come down around to the side of the bed where I'm at. The sunlight hits him and he disappears. December the 12th. I'll never forget that date. I lay down to go to sleep. I don't turn off the light. I leave the TV on. I lay down. I'm getting ready to fall asleep. And boom, he hit my bed so hard. It lifted up. It lifted up. My teeth shattered against each other and I almost fell on the floor. And then I knew. It felt like a horse or a bull was running up behind me. And then it just stopped. And I turned around and I pulled off my headphones and there was nothing there. So I go out into the hallway, I put them back on, boom, 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 and stop.
Because he can experience it. He is clairvoyant. So when spirits are aware that you can see them, they are like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity because when I try to oppress this person, it's going to be more effective because he can actually see us doing the negative behavior, which can be very scary to some people.
I realize now this thing was with me. It was determined to disturb my life by any means. And I would become really, really scared. I would swing at it. I would tell it to leave me alone. And I realized that for as long as I showed fear, activity increased.
He acknowledges that it feeds on fear. And the more fearful responses he gives to it, the more it's going to try to freak him out and scare him. And because it likes that energy output of fear, it feeds on that.
There was just a whole lot of things going on in my life, and I was told that when you got a whole lot of negative stuff going on, your aura is low and something can attach to you. About to go through the divorce, I went through surgery, I lost a job. I think that this thing attached itself to me. At one point I was told that it's a guy from New Orleans and he was an alcoholic. And he died that way, and he was a mean alcoholic. He always stays behind me or underneath my bed. Last night, he was standing right here, just looking at me. I just wanted gone.
Yeah, traumas and life issues can absolutely weaken the aura, leaving the person susceptible to spirits and or entities that want to take advantage and become attachments. So, for example, this client has suffered through addiction, divorce, he went through surgery, and job loss. All of that takes a toll on a person's mind and body and spirit. And so there were crevices for those things to go in and, harass this guy. During my pre-channel, I did see a male human earthy with like scraggly, longish black hair. And he honestly looked like the guy from Harry Potter with the cat. Here's a picture, but with black hair. His hair was kind of like down here. But yeah, I can validate that what he was seeing is true. He is very intrusive, very assertive, very dominant, and abusive. Those are all things that he had when he was alive. And when I mean he, I mean the spirit that's attached to him. Now, here's something important I wanted to point out, because a lot of people, they argue whether or not the Bible is effective for helping people deal with paranormal activity or negative spirits or entities. So you'll have some spirits that are not fazed by the Bible itself. This is a great example of a human earthbound spirit not caring about the Bible. But, please take this into consideration because this is important. Even though this spirit doesn't give two craps about the Bible is still helpful to the client because it does provide him a sense of relief and security, which does take away some of the negative energy that the client is putting out in response. It's helping the client raise his vibration. Not only that, prayer is a great example that can raise your vibration and also bring in positive beings to help protect you. So in this case, when he goes to the Bible, I can see benevolent beings sending him positive energy. I can see past loved ones giving him energy to kind of build up his shield a bit, so when the negative earthy tries to harass him, it's not as effective. So in this instant, it's building his protection up. Even though the spirit's there still trying to harass him, it's not as effective because they're building up his aura. They're building up that shield for him. So if the Bible is something that the client is more accustomed and feels more, I would say, comfortable with, I would continue it. It can be helpful for some people. Some people use prayer beads. All those things are very helpful, especially when you put in the proper intentions. Now, the client does admit that he had a past of addiction with alcohol, which makes perfect sense if you think about the attachment that he attracted. So that energy that he had during the addiction, obviously he's still trying to recover and heal himself from that addiction. But when he was in mid-addiction, he attracted an entity or spirit, well, technically a spirit, that suffered the same thing when he was alive. This is a great example of law of attraction and attracting a spirit going through or who had went through a similar issue. But so the Foreman brothers ask him, hey, did you notice any paranormal activity during your addiction, while you were going through it? And he says no. He noticed it after and while he was clean and working on himself and healing. That, there's a reason behind that. So the attachment came during the addiction. Absolutely, I 100% believe that. But the client didn't notice until he began working on himself and was more level-headed. That's very common. The spirit is trying to work on him to get him to slip up. Because if you think about it, during the addiction, that was constant energy for it to feed off of. Now it's harder for this negative spirit to feed off of him, and the only way it's feeding off of him is through scaring him and feeding off that fear. And because he's healing, he doesn't have all that negative energy from the addiction part. So it's trying to get more food off of him. A lot of times, the attachment will come during the negative behavior caused by the addiction and become undetected because the individual's mind or judgment are clouded from the drug substance, or in his case, the alcohol. That's what the majority of attachments want, an endless food supply. If anything, this is a great indication that the client is trying his best to work on himself, and the spirit is salty about that, so it's trying to do everything it can to produce a fear or negative response out of him. So again, he's struggling for food, so he's trying to do everything in its power to get him to slip up or create a response that's negative enough for it to feed off of.
I played with a Ouija board when I was a kid, and something came out of it. I woke up, there was this really dark figure, and then there was this really white figure with a bird head. My mother came up, she saw us playing with the Ouija board. She was really, really angry. She broke it up, she put it in the box, she taped up the box, and she set it out for the trash. And I never saw those things again.
So here, the client admits that when he was younger, he did mess with a Ouija board. I'm starting to notice a correlation. Now, this is just for research purposes only, so this is not fact. This is just something I've noticed with my clients anyway, that those that are very energy sensitive, they kind of tend to steer towards divination practices, whether that is a Ouija board or using a pendulum or scrying or whatever. A lot of them use the Ouija board, but they tend to steer because they notice that there are things going on and they want answers. They just get it in the wrong way. And I feel like he was very he acknowledged that there was stuff around him, and to get answers, that's what he did. He used the Ouija board. And during my pre-channel, I did see the bird thing he was talking about. However, I don't think that bird thing is the same thing that's attached to him currently. But what I will say is, I do think from a younger age, it did work on him in the way of, even though he may have already had mental health issues from life experiences, I think it warmed down more. I think it contributed to his addiction. But I think something else took its place, which is the current thing. So I do want to validate that for him. But I think, if anything, back then, it contributed energetically to some of those poor decisions and bad luck stuff. And then when the mother got rid of it, it put the entity back further from him, but he still had those energy cords. Even if the entity wasn't technically in that location, it still had those energy cords to influence him. When they pulled out the recorder for the EVP session, I got really dizzy. I had to stop. This is actually kind of where I took a break because I wanted to continue doing another channel, and then I waited another day to continue to refresh my brain so I didn't have any fresh biases trying to dictate certain things. I'll do that on occasion, especially if there's a certain image because of something somebody said, I'll want that out of my brain so it doesn't influence anything. And yeah, it's kind of starting fresh in a way. And so that's what I did, and I started doing some more channeling. I mean, I was getting a headache, I was getting really tired, and I did pick up that the earthy that is attached to him is a slight shapeshifter because he wasn't dead long enough. He hasn't gotten enough power to be full-blown trickstery, but enough to be a pain in the butt. But there were certain elements that he likes to keep too when he does the shapeshifting, and that is the hair. But there are also certain oppression patterns that he likes to keep, but it is difficult to pinpoint the original form of what he looked like when he was alive due to the fact that there's multiple spirits and entities in that vicinity, like the city. There's just so much going on there that it was kind of distracting me away from what I wanted to focus on. But I did keep seeing a lot of creepy faces smiling at me, which they do that because they know it is unnerving and unsettling, and I hate that. And so because they know that, they'll just keep doing it. And this is where Spirit was so I know you spent a lot of time and energy on this video, but we're gonna have you stop. And I was like, why? And at first I'm like, is it because of the entity or spirit not wanting me to look into the truth? Or is it because my guides are telling me to stop for a reason? So I came to the conclusion that it was my guides, because they then told me that by looking further into this case, I could delay the client's healing. So far, he's doing everything that needs to be done as far as healing his mind, body, and spirit. Once he moves out of that area, things will improve even further. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get things where they need to be. So when you come from addiction or any kind of mental health issues, any kind of physical health issues, he just had surgery, like, that takes time to heal. I think what the Foreman brothers did by doing the cleansing there, it's very helpful, and in him moving out of that toxic area, it is going to improve his situation significantly. And so they pretty much were telling me, like, there's not much you can really add to this, and you don't want to, like, if the client does see the video, you don't want to, like, mess up his train of thought, because right now he's in a better place and he's improving himself. And so I was like, roger that. I am not gonna dive in deeper. I mean, they pretty much nailed what was going on in terms of what was attached to him. He knows what he has to do. And I'm actually glad that Josh gave him those prayer beads, because I think it'll add even more protection to him, because he does find comfort in that type of thing, whether it's the Bible or prayer beads. But I think those things will help him significantly. Do I think that the attachment is still there even after the cleansing? It's complicated, because when you do cleansings and stuff like that, a lot of times the spirit doesn't necessarily get kicked out right away. It depends on the situation. So a lot of times, and this is something that Chas and I noticed, when you do your cleansings and you do what you're supposed to do, the entity or spirit attachment gets further and further away from the person. And I noticed with the cleansing that that's what's going on. The spirit attachment is getting further away from the client. It's just going to take time for it to, like, be completely gone. But so as long as that client continues on working on himself, mind, body, and spirit, on his mental health, continues on going to therapy and staying away from the thing he was addicted to, he's going to be fine. Do I think he could benefit from some Reiki sessions? Absolutely. It would help, get rid of some of those tethers from that attachment. But even though that this is technically an ongoing open case, there's still going to be improvements. And once he gets out of that location and moves into a better area, if the Foreman brothers come back again and do another cleansing, it's going to push that spirit back even further. And I think he needs to be in that new area before he gets another cleansing. Because like I said, the stuff that's going on in that city is not helping anybody. And not only that, it's for the safety of the Foreman brothers. I think if they don't have to worry about their safety, not that they were necessarily too worried about it in the video and while they were there, I think it'll just make it even better all the way around. But yeah, I mean, I think this video, I think this case, even though it's ongoing, I think this is a great example of a client that will be in good standing and the attachment will be bye-bye sooner rather than later. It just takes a bit of time. And that has to do with the healing journey and that client's timeline. So I think this was a really great case. And yeah, guys, definitely go watch their full video. I thought it was pretty good. But yeah, guys, I'm going to leave it there. And stay tuned for the next video. And it's going to be about my astral realm experience, which was extremely vivid and that had to do with the Foreman brothers on a case. I don't know which case, but maybe one of you guys will figure it out, or maybe it's a case that they haven't released yet. I don't know, but it's very interesting because of the stuff that happened to me there. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all soon, and peace out.